What's up, guys? Today, Relentless Growth explains GDP per capita and its limitations. To skip to the limitations, skip to the timestamp on the screen. First, let's break out what gross domestic product is. GDP per capita is a metric that breaks down a country's economic output per person and is calculated by dividing the GDP of a country by its population. It's generally considered the go-to economic indicator for an economy's health, which is why we also traditionally define an economic recession as a period of 2 business quarters with falling GDP, which, assuming no massive population change, would correlate to the GDP per capita. But the National Bureau of Economic Research has since modified its criteria for a recession to be more robust. Developed, industrialized, or technical countries tend to have the highest GDP per capita, alongside small states or micronations who are very rich in some resource or export. For example, the GDP per capita of the U.S. was around $67,000 in 2019, derived from around $22 trillion in economic activity across roughly 332 million people. The U.S. also happens to be 3.8 million square miles. Trust me, this helps make a point. However, teeny little Qatar, a sub-peninsula of the Arabian Peninsula, is only around 4,500 square miles. But Qatar's GDP per capita is $71,000 based on $195 billion and a population under 3 million. Upon closer inspection, you would also find that a normal person's quality of life doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with GDP per capita. America's median income is about $50,000 a year, which is less than the GDP per capita. And in the case of Qatar, more than 60% of their GDP is derived from fossil fuels. So, Americans aren't quite as well off as a normal person might assume by the GDP per capita. And Qatar could have their economy catch fire just by oil or gas having troubles like, a Saudi-Russian oil war. GDP per capita will also leave out some important transactions, like when a middleman purchases something that is only meant to be used to make a finished product. For instance, if a factory purchases iron to make nails, the sale of nails add to GDP, but the iron does not. GDP also leaves out real estate transactions for all but the first time that a home is sold. However, GDP and GDP per capita can also count transactions that don't really make sense. The easiest way to visualize this is in paying for services. Let's pretend that we have a small economy of 2 gentlemen, Tommy and Thomas. Tommy tells Thomas he'll pay him $500 to sprint headfirst into a brick wall. Thomas isn't too bright, so he obliges, and now is even less bright. But Thomas has at least one good idea. He decides to take his $500 and then tell Tommy that Thomas is willing to pay him $500 to also sprint headfirst into the same brick wall. As we've seen, Tommy isn't very bright either, so Tommy sprints headfirst into a brick wall and collects $500. Pretending this tiny little economy of 2 people is all that we have going on, and that people would actually record a transaction like this properly, you technically just increased GDP by $1,000. Even though anyone with more common sense than Tommy or Thomas can tell that no goods or services were really added to the economy. Let me know if you enjoy this kind of short-form content. If you prefer something less academic or longer, I'm linking 2 videos on the screen now that should interest you. If you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you want more people to hear the sad story of Thomas and Tommy, hit the like button so this video gets around. And finally, comment below on what topics you'd like to see me cover next. You only have one life to live. Grow it relentlessly.